We're coming in hot to give you our hot takes on all the latest mental health news.
From headlines and memes to developments and breakthroughs.
We go into this show blind with the hopes of learning something new.
Before sharing some bunny hugs.
And leaving with our eyes wide open. I'm Nick.
And I'm Todd. And this is Mental Health Headline Hot Takes.
We're glad you're here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Mental Health Headline Hot Takes with Nick and Todd. And we are going to spin this wheel and see who gets to go first. Stop. What does it say?
Statement of gratitude by Nick.
Oh, wow. That's the first time we've ever gotten that.
Look at that.
Well, I have a good one. I am grateful for your continued flexibility with my chaotic schedule and my forgetfulness, especially the last few weeks as I've been traveling for work and traveling for work 2 weeks straight. So,
wow.
Yeah, I'm grateful for your flexibility on scheduling and willingness to work within my craziness the last couple of weeks.
Hey, it's especially. My pleasure. I have a life too. I get it. I appreciate that, but thank you. Okay, here we go again.
And stop.
Todd goes first.
Now back to regularly scheduled programming.
I think it does work better when you do the stop part. Okay, so this story is called Teens Who Use Marijuana Are More Likely to Suffer Psychotic Disorders, study finds.
I saw this.
And the article is by Akshay Sayal, MD. This is from NBC News. And it says teenagers who used cannabis within the last year had a dramatically higher rate of developing a psychotic disorder, according to a study published Wednesday. The study, led by researchers from the University of Toronto, found an 11 times higher risk of developing a psychotic disorder among teenagers who used cannabis compared to those who did not. When the analysis was limited to just emergency rooms visits and hospitalizations, there was a 27-fold increase in psychotic disorders in teenagers who used the drug. Andre McDonald, the study's lead author, says, I think there's enough evidence out there for us to give recommendations that teens probably shouldn't be using cannabis, which is the understatement of the year. While most teenagers use cannabis will not develop psychotic disorders, McDonald said the findings are concerning, given how debilitating these conditions can be. The new study, like previous research on marijuana psychosis, does not directly prove that marijuana is causing the psychotic disorders. While it's possible that teens who are prone to develop psychotic disorders could just be craving marijuana, but it's unlikely because of how striking the association was. One theory is that disruptions to the endocannabinoid system in adolescents may make psychotic symptoms more likely. So there you go.
Well, I think this is simple. I have a hot take, and it's simple, and it's quick, and it's easy. And it is, when a brain is developing at such a young age, I don't think we should be using these types of treatments. And I extend that out to some medications too. Like I think about the roller coaster of emotions and stuff of being a young kid for me, and then a teenager, and even a young adult into my 20s. It was a freaking roller coaster. I shouldn't have been doing anything that like alters my brain chemistry, like you're not even fully developed. So I just think that's something that we should be very careful with. That's also, I really, really struggle with like kids that are like put on Ritalin or ADHD medication so willingly, when it's like, maybe they're just a kid or going to grow out of it or something. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case for everyone, but it just seems so normalized now that anything to me that chemically alters the brain of a young person whose brain is still developing, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the results could be. And we should study that more.
I do have some young relatives that are on ADHD meds, and they're prepubescent. One is pubescent, I guess, but
what does that mean? I don't even know what that word means.
Pre-puberty.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Didn't know
that. I worry, but also, I mean, it is helping them, but I don't know what long-term effects are going to do. But But yeah, and like when you think of hormones and all the things
I
that a teenager,
know.
it's like having a pregnant woman smoking weed. Like,
We all agree
forget
that's
about
a
the
bad idea, right?
yeah, but it just forget the effects it's going to do to the baby. But like it will. I mean, their brains are already full of change in hormones and whatever. It would be nice to know how many young kids are going to substances because their brains are craving it, like they are
Oh,
prone
totally.
to it,
Well, and
as
just
opposed
the
to
curiosity of it, the um
yeah,
you're so uncomfortable in your skin so much of the time that like you just want anything to kind of like at least that's how I
yeah.
felt.
Did you ever use marijuana or alcohol as a teenager?
I did not actually. I didn't drink until I was 21.
Hmm,
I didn't try any cannabis until it was legal.
really?
Yeah, I was pretty straight and narrow.
Wow. The Catholic Church did a number on
It
you.
sure did.
Well, I started drinking when I was like 12 or 13, I think,
I
but
Most people have. I think that's so. I can't even imagine being 12 or 13 and drinking.
I mean,
Like I was writing screenplays and playing with action figures. Like,
I was doing that too, but I was hammered. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, even just looking at my kids who are like 17 and 19, I'm like, they seem way too young to do anything.
mm.
I'm like, oh my God, I was even younger than, like, I was 5, 10 years younger than them almost. But I didn't use marijuana until I was in my 20s. Um, but I know, like they say, even with drinking as a teenager, with addictions, it's like the when you start drinking regularly, you're almost like emotionally stunted at that age
mm.
too, let
Mm-hmm.
alone whatever it's actually doing to your brain too and stuff. So I mean, I don't know if legalization is making things worse or kids are just going to do that stuff anyway, but
I think it's, I mean, we're just speculating, no data, but it probably just
mhm.
makes it easier to get. That makes it,
Well,
right, more readily available.
yeah, yeah. And I guess less scary too, because you're like it's one thing drinking
Right,
underage. It's another thing like I'm drinking underage, and this is like, an illegal substance I'm using.
right, right.
So yeah, yeah, it's probably not helping, but I have no answers. I just have
No,
the
I don't
article.
either. I don't either. I just think we need to be careful with what we do with developing brains and look into more research as to how different types of things impact people's mental wellness.
And I mean, as a kid, I was told all this stuff even 30 years ago, wherever it was. It
Oh,
didn't stop me from trying it.
oh
Then once
yeah.
I tried it, I liked it.
Did you
So then I
have
did it more.
did you have Dare?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Or just say no.
Yeah,
What's her
just say
Nancy
no.
Reagan
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Kids around school would be wearing just say no hats.
Dare
But
hats for us or
their
shirts. It was
hats. Yeah.
shirts. It was
Yeah. What
shirts.
shirts? Yeah.
D, I won't do
But,
drugs. A, won't have an attitude. R, I will respect myself. And E, I will educate.
huh.
That's what it stands for. There's a
Oh,
song.
okay.
I could sing the song, but I won't.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not. I'm
No, it's
not.
copyrighted. We
Yeah.
don't want to get sued.
Right. Right.
So,
So I guess this is
yes,
my turn. Um,
sure.
so my story is kind of sad, but it highlights an issue that I champion, myself. But the headline is Parents Called for Mental Health Help. The police arrived and fatally shot their son.
Hmm.
The subheadline, less than 10 seconds after officers opened the door, police shot Yong Yang in his parents' Koreatown home while he was holding a knife during a bipolar episode.
Less than 10 seconds.
Less than 10 seconds. And
Phew.
the link down here in the show notes, I just want to warn everyone, or if you want to see it, there is video of from the police
The
cam,
shooting?
the body cam.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
Damn.
yeah, Yong was 40 years old. He had a knife in his hand. Less than 10 seconds, he was shot and fatally killed. He has a diagnosis of bipolar disorder for 15 years, and in an episode, and this is why you can't call the police for who have no crisis training, have no mental illness training, and are a bunch of trigger happy crazy people, it seems like sometimes. And you know, that's not a knock on all cops, but it's a knock on a lack of training. And you know, on top of that, you have an entire system that is needed for crisis intervention with trained professionals, with trained mental health experts, to de-escalate these situations. Like, I'm sure they were terrified and they didn't know what to do, but like, please do not call the police if someone's in a mental health crisis. Like, it's just, this happens a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot more than it should. And so I just wanted to highlight this because I think that it's a really big issue that people with mental health illness challenges, whatever, are being victimized in this type of way. It's awful. I mean, it's just awful.
Mm-hmm. What city was this in?
It was
LA?
somewhere in California. I can look really quick. It might have been LA.
It says Koreatown. I just think LA,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Los Angeles. Yep.
um, yeah, and I mean it happens here in Canada too. I think it does depend on the city and the state, probably, because there has been some in my local city. There's been some improvements. There's a team of social workers now that go out with the cops during
We have that
these
in
health
a
checks.
specific district in Chicago that I know of for sure too.
Oh yeah, right. So
But the
I mean, it's kind
dispatcher,
of being addressed, but
if I remember correctly, though, the dispatcher has to say or identify that this is a mental health crisis. So there's still that level of like, why do we not have them for everything, right?
yeah. And there was no mention, like no one's blaming the race or anything like that of the, it's not like a
Not
racial
in
thing at all.
the not in the article. I do think it's
Okay.
noteworthy though, because um, you know, people. How do I say this?
Well, if the police went to some house in Beverly Hills when it was white people and it was a guy holding a knife, would the same thing have
Well, the
happened?
police officer was Andreas Lopez, so it's
Oh,
like
I see.
I
Okay.
think you don't want to discount the race, but I don't think they're not saying it's because of the race, right?
Okay. Not in this instance, anyway.
Yeah, and especially like you don't want like I wouldn't want to discount the race because hey, everyone, you know, Korean Americans also have mental health challenges. You know, it's like I'm mentioning it again, but Dr. Paul Rivera, who I recorded a podcast with, he talks a lot about redefining Latino masculinity, but it is
Mm,
also there's masculinity in general, but like there's a specific um, you know, reason that Latino masculinity also needs to be something that's identified as a subset, right? So I think it's
right. But
similar
each
here.
culture has their own
Yeah,
view of masculinity. And
yeah.
hmm, I, I, uh, I think I said this a few episodes ago too, that during my suicide attempt, there was a knife and stuff, and cops came in, and I'm just so grateful things didn't escalate. I didn't go to
Uh,
jail.
I thought of you
I didn't
when
get
I read this.
yeah.
Actually,
Oh,
yeah, I
yeah.
thought of your
Okay. So,
story.
yeah, I didn't get zapped. I didn't get shot. I didn't go to jail. I got handcuffed and sent to a hospital to get help,
Hmm.
which is
That
which
might have gone
is
very different in the
nice.
U.S. To be honest.
Well, even here in Canada, like I said, the cop, the one cop, he was on Facebook being discriminatory towards Indigenous people, and there's a lot of Indigenous population around me, and if I was Indigenous, would it have had the same results? Yeah. So who would you call then? Instead, if you were
So
these people's parents or
if
this person's parents?
um, that's a good question. I would probably call. I would.
Is there
That's a
a
good.
crisis helpline or something?
I mean, you could always call a crisis helpline, but I feel like um, there are like mental health services in Chicago. Like we do have public services. Here in LA, there was a mental health department that declined to comment, but they did they did say in previous statements that they have field intervention teams that are trained to de-escalate mental health crises without law enforcement. So in this effort here, and maybe there was an educational piece, right, where they just didn't know. And I can imagine, I think about this sometimes where I'm like, what would happen if I got mugged? So there's flight and God, I can't speak again. It's like every week.
Flight, freeze, or fawn.
Yeah. And so I think like in a crisis like that, you might instinctually just call 911 and not be able to clearly think about what the options are. But then you also have to know that there are other solutions there, right? So
yeah, right. It's like any other training. You have to get it in your brain. And I mean, I'm sure his parents were scared. Like maybe he was being violent towards them with a knife. Like, of course you want to call police.
Yeah. They had said it never turned violent.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So yeah, anyway, the whole situation is just awful. I just hope that when there are mental health departments or services, people think and have the wherewithal to go that route. Because typically they're going to be trained to in some way to de-escalate potential violence. Now, I'm not saying that someone, in crisis who has a gun and is shooting a gun or something, like, okay, maybe it's time to call the police, right? You got to find that line. But it's just it's just sad.
Yeah. And I mean, if you are in a mental health crisis and you are having homicidal or suicidal thoughts, sirens and lights and people in uniforms with guns, just seeing that does not de-escalate anything. And it's like, so yeah. I don't
Did
know,
you think in your experience, like, were you were, I remember we talked about it on my podcast, but what was your thought when the police came? If you remember, like, did you have any,
man, I don't know. I was so completely out of it. I mean, it did. What's the word I'm looking for? It didn't make me more violent, but it did de-escalate it. That's for sure. Like it was like, yeah. I think if someone with a lab coat came in and said, "Todd, I think you're acting irrational," it would have been better, perhaps, as opposed to like.
Well, and trained in de-escalating someone who's in an episode, right?
Right. Well, see, in my situation, my brother was on top of me, holding me down. So then the cops came in, saw a knife on the floor and a big guy on top of another guy, and they just like started like grabbing my brother, and like it was like instantly all hell broke loose too. Like they said under 10 seconds. It was the same thing. Like the police came in, and it was just like, holy shit, what's going on? And then there was like, it was like a hockey fight in the corner, just like it was chaos. So from what I remember, slash what I was told, because I don't quite remember, but it was definitely not de-escalating. It wasn't like they came in and said, "Sir, why are you on top of this other gentleman?" It was just like, "What the fuck?" And then, so anyway, yeah.
Well, that makes
good times.
Yeah, that's it's all very complex, but cops are not trained to be in that situation. Like they're just not.
Yeah.
So
no. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is a sad one. Because one of the reasons it's sad is because we don't have answers, and it's so complex that you can't just make one law or one decision and fix it all. So
that's exactly right.
It's situation to situation, but anyway, if you have any answers how to fix this, let us know. You can contact us with our links below, and you can listen or watch these episodes. Again, the links are below. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, guys. Have a good week.
Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
This has been our Mental Health Headline Hot Takes.
We're so glad you came.
Remember, when you heal yourself,
you heal the world.
Be sure to like this video, leave comments, and suggest articles for future episodes.
Hit subscribe to Eyes Wide Open
and Bunny Hugs and Mental Health.